The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
Okay. Somebody else was using it? Yes. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vibhuḥ Hari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vibhuḥ Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Girivaradham Hari Jaya Gopi Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Rajvanarandana Yashodanandana Rajvanarandana Yashodanandana Rajvanarandana Yashodanandana Rajvanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanatari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanatari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari 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 Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradham Hari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradham Hari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradham Hari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradham Hari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Gopi Vallabha Jaya Gopi Jantavaḥ Yashodanandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Shyam Sundara Jaya Radha Shyam Sundara Jaya Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada हम सब चाया सुता सत्य शिष्य ऐसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय विश्वपाद परमहंस चाया सुता सत्य शिष्य भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर गोस्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय श्री रूप श्री सनातन भट्टरगनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टर सरगनाथ साधु गोस्वामी प्रभु की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवधरी गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री राधा कृष्ण गो गोपाल गोपी गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गिरि गोवर्धन की श्री वृंदावन धाम की श्री मथुरा धाम की श्री मायापुर धाम की श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की तुलसी महारानी भक्ति देवी की गंगा यमुना देवी की श्री कृष्ण Radha Shama Sundar Keki, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guranga, all glories to Shri Prabhupada. So we're reading from the Bhagavad, 5th chapter, text number 15. Nādatte kasyacit pāpaṁ na caiva sukṛtaṁ vibhuḥ ajñānenāvṛtaṁ jñānaṁ tena muhyanti jantavaḥ nādatte kasyacit pāpaṁ na caiva sukṛtaṁ vibhuḥ ajñānenāvṛtaṁ jñānaṁ tena muhyanti jantavaḥ. Word for word. Na
Na.
Never.
Never.
Nādatte. Accepts.
Accepts.
Kasyacit.
Kasyacit.
Anyone's.
Pāpaṁ.
Sin.
Sin.
Na.
Nor.
Cha. Also. Eva. Certainly. Sukṛtaṁ. Pious activities. Vibhuḥ. The Supreme Lord. Ajñānenāvṛtaṁ. By ignorance. Nāvṛtaṁ. Covered. Jñānaṁ. Knowledge. Tena. By that. muhyanti. Are bewildered. Jantavaḥ. The living entities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Translation. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Purport. The Sanskrit word vibhuḥ means the Supreme Lord who is full of unlimited knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation. He is always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life. And thereby his chain of action and reaction begins. A living entity is, by superior nature, full of knowledge. Nevertheless, is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is vibhuḥ or omniscient, but the living entity is anu or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. And so, when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires. But the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as pāpaṁ atma, or the super soul. And therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul, as one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desires as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute, independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to Him and be eternally happy. The Vedic hymns therefore declare, Esha uhi eva sadhu karma karya unini Esha u eva sadhu karma karyati yam adhonishi sate. The Lord engages the living entity in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in pious activities so that he may go to hell. Agyo jantora nishoyam atmana sukha dukhayo ishvara prayeri duggachet sargam vash abram evacha. The living entity is completely dependent on his distress and happiness. By the will of the Lord, he can go to heaven or hell as a cloud is driven by the air. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position of service to the Lord and is thus entrapped by nescience. And under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. The Vedanta Sutras also confirm this. Vaishamya naigrinyena sapikshatvat tatha hidashayati. The Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, though he appears to. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshorannritam Yanam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Sapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yutavadagamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parjamasvaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanvidam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Radha Kanta Namastude Tapta Kanchani Devi Pranami Hari Priya Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Paditanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare. Nādatte kasyacit pāpaṁ na caiva sukṛtaṁ vibhuḥ ajñānenāvṛtaṁ. God assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Krishna. And this chapter, 5th chapter, is entitled as Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness, acting for the pleasure of the Lord. As we know that the highest of all forms of yoga is Bhakti Yoga, to do everything with devotion. But we immediately come to the highest development. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 4th chapter, that we have to take shelter with the spiritual master, properly understand about pure devotional service, about what to do and what not to do. So Arjuna is, of course, the eternal associate of the Lord, and at the same time also for the benefit of the conditioned souls. He is of Arjuna, and Arjuna is accepting that position as disciple, so to say, for the benefit of. So here it is mentioned about the living entities who are engaged in this world in various activities. Here regarding to sinful and pious activities. And so Krishna is explaining, nādatte kasyacit pāpaṁ. That the Lord is never accepting the sinful activities of the living entities. In other words, that is completely aloof of the living entities. In this material world, he's accompanying the living entities situated in everyone's heart. And ultimately, of course, by the will of the Lord, or by the sanctioning of the Lord, the living entity can act in a certain way. Therefore, it is mentioned here in the purport. Prabhupada is referring to the Vedic hymns, and there it is mentioned that the Lord engages the living entities in pious activities, and the Lord engaging the living entities in impious activities, so he may go to hell. So it appears to be, and in one sense it is true that the Lord is sanctioning. And for example, even Prabhupada used to say that the Lord sometimes is a difficult situation. Just to give some example, a tough job for the Lord. Sometimes the devotees also who have to manage different things, dealing with different devotees also, even who is in charge of different personalities, temple president or department head. So sometimes there's some difficulty there between even the devotees, and then the authority has to then try to settle the matter. But then many times it is difficult because both sides, they are thinking they are right. And here So Prabhupada one time he gave the example, just like a rich person. So he wants to protect himself from thieves. So he may even have a fence, electric fence, and he may have a dog to protect his place. And then he's maybe even praying if he has some understanding of the Lord, little understanding of the Lord, he will pray to the Lord, my dear Lord, please protect me from any thief. And there's another person there who is seeing the rich man's house, and he knows this person has a lot of money. But when he's seeing the fence is there, the dog is there guarding the house, he's thinking how I'm going now to go and steal some money from there. And the person is hoping that I hope nobody will steal my money. And the Lord is there in the heart of the rich person, in the heart of the poor person. So difficult job for the Lord. So he has to try to help each and every person. Of course, you have to do right things when one is in this world. One has to act usually according to the instructions of the Lord, according to the Vedic literatures. But not everyone is always able to do so, or not knowing what to do sometimes also. So, but actually it doesn't mean that the Supreme Lord is affected by that. By the rich man who is praying, please protect, and by the poor man or the thief who is saying, please, my dear Lord, you may also be praying to the Lord, my dear Lord, please let me get something from that place. So the Lord is not affected. And so, but according to actually, it's not that he will then favor either the rich person or the poor person. No, he's neutral. But according to the karma, the previous activities, one becomes rich and one becomes poor, and then he wants to steal. But then he goes on, and now the poor person tries to steal from the rich person. And so he may be able to do that if the rich person has some, so he has a good karma that is rich, but maybe did something wrong. So then now the poor person who has not so good karma, but somehow then he's able to come and steal something. But the Lord is completely neutral. But it appears to be sometimes that he's actually having his hand there also, but he's completely aloof. But he's the permitter. He's permitting the person to do something due to his karma also. But then if the Lord doesn't want, then nothing can happen. So, but mostly the Lord is neutral. But the Supreme Lord, he wants the living entity to come to his senses, to understand that he's not his body, that he is a spirit soul, and that God exists, and that the living entity should try to take shelter of the Supreme Lord and try to go to the spiritual world. So nādatte kasyacit pāpaṁ, so he doesn't accept, or is not responsible, has nothing to do with the pāpaṁ, the sinful activities of a person. Na caiva sukṛtaṁ vibhuḥ, na eva sukṛtaṁ. Cha also eva certainly sukṛtaṁ. Krit means activity, su inspires activity. So he has also nothing to do with that. Vibhuḥ, so Prabhupada, so the word vibhuḥ is there. Vibhuḥ refers to the Supreme Lord. Vibhuḥ means great. So Prabhupada is explaining the purport about Vibhuḥ, referring to the Supreme Lord. Bhagavan, who is full of all opulences. But many times so it is explained about the Sar Aishwarya Purna Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord who has 6 opulences. Gyan, knowledge. Aishwarya means riches, opulence. Bal, strength. Yash, fame. And then Tyag, renunciation. And also Saundarya, beauty. So Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Vishnu also is most knowledgeable, has all opulence, strength, fame, beauty, and most beautiful, the Lord. And fully renounced, not attached to anything of this world. He doesn't need anything. So therefore also Prabhupada is explained. Apta, Atmaram. So that is mentioned. Atmaram and Aptakam. He's satisfied in himself. Krishna, Supreme Lord. Aptakam, he doesn't have any desires to be fulfilled. His desires are always fulfilled. Whatever he wants, he can accomplish, he can get. So that is Aptakam. And so even sometimes the pure devotees are also known as Atmaram, taking pleasure in the self. And also Aptakam. They don't have any desires to be fulfilled because they're fully engaged in the service of the Lord. So vibhuḥ refers to the Supreme Lord, Krishna or Mahaprabhu, Vibhuḥ Chaitanya. So he's unlimited, great. And the living entity is addressed as Anu, Anuchit Shakti, an infinitesimal spirit being. By nature, his existence is also eternal, and he can have full knowledge. We understand that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and then he can also be blissful, Satchidananda Vigraha. But his infinitesimal is just a small part of Krishna, of the Supreme Lord. Just like the sun is there, huge, the sun planet. And so many sun rays emanate from the Supreme, from the sun. And there are many particles in the sunshine. So there may be, so the living entities are considered or compared to that. Small particles in the sunshine. Surya Kiran. So Krishna is the transcendental sun, and the living entities are the infinitesimal part and parcels of the Supreme Lord. Anu, atomic. So ajñānenāvṛtaṁ. So they are in ignorance. So they are covered by ignorance, by the modes of material nature, forgetful of their true transcendental nature. So by nature the jiva, jñānaṁ, so that is mentioned here, he has knowledge, Sat-Chit Ananda Swarup. By nature, the jiva, the living entity, is eternal, and he has knowledge, and Anand is experiencing bliss. But being forgetful of the Lord, and being under the influence of modes of material nature, he does not understand his eternal position as a servant of Krishna, and he's bewildered, is covered by ignorance. And therefore, in this material world, he will most of the time be suffering. Although there may be some happiness, but it is very temporary happiness. But there are more distresses there. So the living entity, jantavaḥ, muhyanti is bewildered. But the Supreme Lord He is very merciful and is trying to help the conditioned soul. Therefore, he is situated in everyone's heart as the super soul and is trying to induce the jiva, the conditioned soul, to come to spiritual life. And therefore, it is quite natural that the human being will ask some questions to himself also. Why am I here in this material world? And what is the purpose of this material world? What will happen at the time of death? Is there a supreme power there? Is there God? So the questions will naturally come in the human being. So, and those who are fortunate, and those who are pious, then they become more inquisitive. And then the Supreme Lord within the heart may also try to guide him more. And externally, the Supreme Lord will try to also arrange that he may meet his representative, the spiritual master, so that he can make advancement in spiritual life. This material world is souls that have come here. But the Supreme Lord is trying to release them from this position. To do that, to deliver the fully conditioned souls, or is sending his representatives to deliver the fully conditioned souls. And transcendental knowledge is also revealed by himself, by his devotees, or in the form of the Vedic literatures, so that the embodied soul, the conditioned soul, may come to understand about the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and his identity being completely different from the gross and material body, his spiritual identity and his relationship with the Supreme Lord, with God. So the jivas, he has to make an endeavor to learn about the existence of the Supreme Lord. And then the Supreme Lord will help. But others who are not endeavoring, so they will just remain under the influence of the three modes of material nature, and they will suffer in this material world. So by the mercy of the Lord, when the living entity takes up to a spiritual life, then gradually we can come to know more and more. So here in this chapter, so karma yoga is explained. So that means the living entity is understanding that the Supreme Lord is existing, and that there is a relationship with the Supreme Lord. And so therefore is engaging in activities for the pleasure of the Lord. And of course, and also, so he may advance in spiritual life, and he may live also peaceful in this material world. So karma means activity. Yoga means to link. This is practically the first step for the for the jivas when they take up spirit life. Of course, different branches are there, different paths are there. So one is karma yoga, and then jnana yoga is that by engaging in studying the scriptures, knowledge, then one can come in Lord. Because even just by acting for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, then one can advance in spiritual life. But knowledge is very much required. It is important to gain knowledge from the scriptures, from the spiritual master. So then one can more rapidly advance in spiritual life. So Krishna is giving this transcendental knowledge to his devotee, to his pure devotee, Arjuna, and actually for the benefit of all the conditioned souls. And in this chapter, at the end of the chapter, so very clearly, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna what has to be understood. Bhuktarang yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suriram sarvabhutanam gyatvam shantim richyati. That one can attain peace. One can be peaceful if one is understanding. The Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, Bhuktarang, and yagya tapasam. That all activities, yagya, so they mean sacrifice. So there's a fire sacrifice, that one kind of sacrifice. But then even, for example, working, so by working one has to also, from one point of view, do some sacrifice. For example, mostly one has to work for 8 hours. One has to leave the house, the comforts of the house. One has to go to the office. In the West, many times, or even in India, traveling or going by train or by bus or by car, many times for 1 hour, 1.5 hours till the working place. And then staying there for 8 hours, and in between one has a little break to eat something, lunch, and then again in the evening has to come back, traveling 1 hour, 1.5 hour. So there's a big actually sacrifice, yeah, and it is not easy. Many times it is very difficult, very tiresome. And then one comes back home and then one is exhausted. So that is a kind of sacrifice. But the Supreme Lord has to be in the center. Yajna Vishnu, sacrifice, fire sacrifice, and they have to be done for the pleasure of Krishna, not even for the demigods. Similarly, one has to work, undoubtedly, but it should be done for the pleasure of Krishna. Best is if one can directly work for Krishna. But if this is not possible, if one has to have some activity to earn some money, then then one should give up the result, as Krishna is also explaining in the second chapter. Karmaniva vikaraste. You remember? No? Mahaprabhu Kadachana. One has a right to work, but one is not entitled to the fruits of one's work. So when he's working, then one will get some remuneration, but the whole amount is actually not his. One can take something, but then something should be given to the Lord. So that is in karma yoga. So one has to act, but it should be for the pleasure of the Lord, ultimately. So, but of course, higher than that, that is to do everything with devotion and directly for the Lord. So that is only possible if one is under the guidance of the spiritual master, if one is performing sadhana bhakti, chanting the holy names every day, studying the scriptures, worshipping the deities. Then even if one has to work, then, but if the strong sadhana is there for the pleasure of the Lord under the guidance of the spiritual master, then even whatever one is doing, if one is then also giving up the result of his work to the Lord, then that becomes devotional service, then becomes bhakti. So there's a slight difference is there, because ultimately there may be also a big difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga. So, but bhuktarang yaga tapasan. So, sacrifice has to be performed for the pleasure of the Lord. Austerity has to be done. One has to, just like Chaturmas, one has to do some austerity, or Purushottamas, Kartik Mas. And one has to give up sense gratification and act for the pleasure of Krishna. Krishnendriya Priti, Atmendriya Tripti should be given up, doing things for one's own senses. But Krishnendriya Priti, for the pleasure of the senses of Krishna, for Krishna's pleasure, one has to do everything ultimately. Anukulana Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Ruttamam. It should be favorable as Krishna desires. Then it becomes pure devotional service. And Anyavilashita Sunyam Dhyana Karmanāvṛtaṁ. Should be no desire except to satisfy Krishna. Anyavilashita Sunyam. Anya Abhilash should not be any other desire except to please Krishna. Jnana Karma Anavritam. And here the word is there also. Anavrit. So that ajñānenāvṛtaṁ. Ajñānena, in English, by ignorance. Avritam, jñānaṁ, the knowledge is covered by ignorance. Jnānaṁ, the knowledge, avritam is covered by ignorance, ajñān. So, or even if one is then desiring to by one's karma to enjoy the results, so that is also a kind of ignorance. Therefore, it is mentioned, jnana karma nāvṛtaṁ. It should not be covered by this fruitive mentality, or even by trying to gain knowledge, simply for example, also for the sake of acquiring knowledge, for the sake of becoming famous as a great scholar. So these are then ulterior motives, but one should be free from that and do everything for Krishna's pleasure. So that is then pure devotional service, and that has to be attained. So bhuktaranga tapasam, some austerity has to be done, and then everything has to be done for the pleasure of the Lord as He wants. And so then one should understand Sarvaloka Maheshwaram is the greatest personality, greatest controller, Maheshwaram. Sarvaloka, of all the worlds, the spiritual material world. Suridam, Sarvabhutanam. Sarvabhutanam means all the living entities. Suridam, the friend, is the friend of all the living entities. If one is knowing that, then he can become peaceful. He attains peace, shanti. So everyone wants peace. Shanti, shanti, shanti. So, but that is only possible if one is understanding that one has to do everything for Krishna's pleasure. And so one has to try to establish this relationship with Krishna, this friendly relationship, intimate relationship with Krishna. That is the Supreme Lord. Not only that, but he's my best friend. Prananath is the Lord of my life. So then when one is coming to this intimate relationship with Krishna, then only one can be peaceful and one can be successful in life. But in the beginning, one has to follow rules and regulations, and one has to try to act for the pleasure of the Lord. But then as one is going on in one's spiritual life, then the consciousness becomes purified, and then one will understand that Krishna is actually my best friend. And always, and is there in the heart as a super soul, always accompanying us, never leaving us. As long as the living entities in the material world, Paramatma is always with him. Everyone else is coming and going. The father and mother are there for some time, and then they go, or we go. And then if you're not perfect, you have to take another birth, another father, mother is coming. And even the children, they come. Sometimes they leave as well before the parents. And the beloved wife is there, but then after some time also, old age is there, and then first the Prabhu is going, or maybe first wife is going. So everything is temporary. But the Paramatma, the Supreme Lord, in the heart is always there. The Super Soul is always there. Life after life. But even we have to go beyond the Super Soul, because the Super Soul, Paramatma, is only here in the material world. And so therefore there's no eternal relationship with the Super Soul. The eternal relationship is only with Bhagavan. But the Super Soul is a manifestation of Bhagavan helping the conditioned soul in the material world, because they have not understood their actual relationship with Bhagavan. So therefore the Paramatma is there helping, trying to help the conditioned soul. And therefore the devotees, when they become more purified, they will understand Super Soul is there helping me to some extent. But then they will take shelter with the Spirit Master, and then ultimately they will take shelter of Bhagavan and understand that Bhagavan is actually helping me. And then we will offer pranam to Paramatma in the heart, the devotees, but they are crying out to Gauranga, 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 Nityananda, Nityananda, and then Radheshyam, calling out to them. To Bhagavan, they're not calling out to Paramatma, please help me. They're calling out to the Supreme Lord to help. So one has to come to that relationship, the intimate relationship with the Supreme Lord. And that becomes more easy. And then one can be more blissful. And and then ultimately one can then fully realize one's spiritual nature and realize Krishna's transcendental form, beautiful form, Satchidananda Swarup of Krishna, always holding the flute, playing the flute. Of course, sometimes he's playing with his friends and then taking brunch after having a big breakfast at home in the morning. He goes to the pasturing grounds with the cows and calves, and then the lunch bag is there, or something between which they take. And then so he's putting the flute here. The dhoti, and he has a sash. So yellow dhoti and then usually a colored sash, and he's putting the flute here. And he's eating a little bit. But his flute is always with him. And a little free time, then he's playing the flute. Very beautiful. And then he's taking a little break from the friends because he wants to meet his most beloved. The gopis, and he's there noontime at Radha Kund, Shama Kund. There is also performing his pastimes with the gopis, playing the flute, or playing in the water. So that is the Supreme Lord, who is the Aradhya Bhagavan, Brajeshantanyastadhama Vrindavanam, is worshipable Lord of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Pranana, the Lord of the life of the devotees, perform these wonderful pastimes in Braj. So, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they try to establish their relationship with that Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan, Yashodanandan, Gopinath, Shyam Sundar, and of course also with Mahaprabhu, because without the mercy of Mahaprabhu, it is almost impossible to attain Krishna in Braj. So the relationship has to be there also with Mahaprabhu. Loving a relationship, and then one can enter to Braj. But of course, even before that, one has to have a loving relationship with the spiritual master, with the devotees. So that is important. Without a loving relationship with the other devotees, the spiritual master, it will be very difficult to advance in spiritual life, to become free from the modes of material nature. So it starts with the relationship with the devotees and the spiritual master. Loving a relationship. So there one has to be actually selfless and always try to please the spiritual master, the Vaishnavas, not think about himself. So pastime with Krishna, so the gopis were there, and after Ras Leela they were searching for Krishna. So Krishna had left, and then Gopi Gita is there, the gopis singing in separation from Krishna, calling out to Krishna. When Krishna is appearing, and they were very happy. It was making us suffer so much. And then also in transcendental loving exchange and some transcendental there also they ask him, so, and they explain that also. So those who are exchanging the love, somebody educating. Also get love. It's one person. And another person is there, he's not reciprocal, he doesn't care. And the third person there, even if he's not loved, but he's loving. All kinds of persons are there, and then so Krishna then is explaining also. So, but of course, Is explaining that most exalted are those, and they do not expect anything. So there's a Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Now you're unmuted.
Since how long? 6:35, yeah, so we can stop here. Anyone has any question?
So if you
Any
have any
question?
questions, any questions, you can
Have any
unmute.
questions? Any questions? Unmute.
Hare Krishna. No questions, so then we'll stop.
Yes, that's fine, Prabhu.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna, Prabhu.
Krishna.
Thank you very much. Hare
Thank you. Hare
Hare